Welcome home to St. Anne's. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you.
It's officially fall, guys. I'm back in Vestmans. We know it's fall. I know there's officially an autumn date, but really you base it off of when does Starbucks serve the pumpkin spice latte and when does Meg vest again. So it's fall, y'all. Okay, so our gospel reading today, it's a little bit tricky, isn't it? We're not really quite sure what to do with it. Or maybe you are very comfortable with it, and maybe I just don't know quite what to do with it. But I'm just going to assume that the way I feel is universal sensation. So here's a brief retelling, the Meg version of what happens. So Jesus gets invited to a Sabbath dinner held by the Pharisees. Now, we remember who the Pharisees are, right? They're the ones who hold the law. They are the priests of the priests. They're the Roman Catholics. I mean, this is their stuff, right? Now, and I don't mean that in a mean way about the Roman Catholics. They invented Christianity. They are the Christian church. They hold this. This is their stuff. And that's the Pharisees. They hold the faith and the religion of Judaism. And so he's hanging out with the big boys right now. He goes to dinner with the big dogs. And the Pharisees aren't really quite sure what to do with Jesus. I always think of the Episcopal Church when we have these renewal movements. If you were in the Episcopal Church in the 60s or 70s, we were in our masses for a while. And then when I was going through seminary, we were into the emerging church for a while. But now all those emerging church priests are really old. And tattoos and piercings and stuff don't age well, it turns out. So the emerging church is kind of lost its way. I know. Asked me about being in seminary when they came to me and said, "We need you to run a Eucharist." I said, "Excuse me?" And they said, "Well, you're young. You like U2." And I was like, No, I don't. U2 is a little above my age range. But so we kind of have these phases, right? And so the Pharisees aren't really quite sure what to do with Jesus. Is he like a Eucharist? Which all the new kids are going to be really into this Jesus man and his hip music. Right? Is he rock star Jesus? But he also does stuff that really irritates them, right? He makes them look bad. So they're studying Jesus very carefully. Is he going to be good for the brand or bad for the brand? Right? Turns out, generally speaking, he's kind of bad for the brand, but that's the end of the book. We'll get there. Come back on Easter. I'll tell you what happens. And so, guys, I've been on a lot of coffee today, so we're going to see where this goes. I don't know. So, God bless y'all. And so he shows up, and they're watching him very, very carefully. And he is also watching them very, very carefully. And he notices how they do things, right? The Pharisees like rules. The Episcopal Church likes rules. Do you get the parallels that I am making here? Okay. We like rules. We like honor. We have the people who are at the head of the table. We have the people who are below the salt. Right? Now, I'm not wearing a collar today. I know, right? It's because the t-shirt I have on says priest on it. So I figured it denoted the fact that I'm a priest. But there are levels, right? There are gradations. You get a collar. You get the fancy vestments. Now, if you're in a really fancy church, you get a cope. A cope. Do you all know what a cope is? You ain't in a fancy church. Guess you know where you stand. Your priests don't get no cope. So that's how the Pharisees work. So Jesus is watching them, and they really like rules, right? So they have a seating order. And how this works is, and you've all been at fancy dinners, right? You're at a wedding, who gets the head of the table? The places of honor, right? And then, if you're back, and your table doesn't even have a tablecloth on it, Are you sure you got the invitation? Right? So we have gradations. And Jesus sees this. And he's like, that's not really the point, is it? The point isn't to go to the heavenly banquet and have a seat of honor. The point is to go with everybody, right? And so he's like, you guys don't seem to get this. You seem to have put worldly order and rules and all that stuff on to church and God. And that's not how it works. Really, church and God are meant to revolutionize the world. We come to explode all those rules and regulations and ridiculousness because it's absurd. I mean, think about it. Some of these rules are stupid. Like, do you know where collars come from? It's because we just haven't gotten up to date on clothes, right? So, like, back in the olden days, men had attached collars, right? Right? Anyone was there? Don't tell me if you were around at the time of detached collars. I don't want to know. But none of you were. They're long dead. Okay, so clergy were like, well, we got to denote ourselves somehow because, like, we're fancy gentlemen too. So they turned the collar around. It's just a detached, and I would show it to you, except I'm not wearing one today. Usually I am. It's a collar, and it just attaches to my shirt that doesn't have a collar on it, right? Because I remove collars from shirts to put this collar on it. And it is a gentleman's collar turned around. It is a collar. It doesn't mean anything. Now, we can come up with theology around it. We can be like, oh, it reminds us of the collars of the slaves and because we're slaves to Jesus and blah, blah, blah. No, it is a collar turned around. And the reason I wear vestments is because that way you don't know what I'm wearing underneath it. Because, I mean, you kind of know, but you don't really know, right? So the Pharisees have all these rules, but they don't mean anything. And Jesus says, excuse me, this doesn't mean anything. You have lost the meaning of the things because you're so obsessed with the rules that you've come in place, right? It means nothing. So Jesus comes to explode all of our rules and our absurdities to help us see that it's absurd. It's absurd, guys. And if we can't laugh at the absurdity, why are we even here? It's absurd. And Jesus comes to say, this is absurd. And he says, here's the deal. If you really want to get this Christian thing done, if you really want to understand what we're talking about here, don't worry about the rows. Don't worry about the dress code. Don't worry about who's in and who's out. Don't worry about whether or not the invitations are embossed. Just worry about whether or not people feel welcome to show up and come and worship with you. Whether or not people feel welcome at this table is whether or not we are living the Christian life. It has nothing to do with how fancy the rows are. It has nothing to do with whether or not I'm wearing a collar. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're wearing big fancy hats. We don't go to church to be seen. Church is a support group. Church is not a country club. We don't go to see and be seen. We go because we need the support of our brothers and sisters to do this work out there because it's hard. Because when we're talking about inviting everyone to the holy banquet, guys, not everyone. Do you really want to invite to the holy banquet? I mean, can we be real for a second? Some really annoying people out there, and you don't want to invite them to the holy banquet. You're like, like if you have to come, can you sit in the back table without the tablecloths? Like, I'd really prefer you not even come, right? I mean, you have those relatives that you have to invite to Thanksgiving, but you're really hoping that they realize it's as awkward as you realize it is, and they go do something else instead, right? That is the Christian faith. The Christian faith is us being upturned in that and saying, no, everybody. You don't get points for hanging out with your friends. You don't get extra points for wearing the cool clothes and being like, well, that's a cool dress. Where did you get that? That's cool. No, that is not the Christian faith. The Christian faith is saying everybody all the time. We don't get extra points for hanging out with our friends. Though I do hope that when you go to the heavenly banquet, when we're all gathered together, you realize that you make friends with the people that you probably wouldn't have invited. And that, if we get to that place, we get the gospel. Because the gospel is this. The gospel is surrounding yourself with people who make you squirm. And I mean it. Like, you have a visceral reaction because you're like, ugh, right? We all have those, not just me. I'm not the only one who goes, am I? Okay, if I am the only person, you best go to a church that has a cope. Because we're in trouble here. But no, the gospel is not only tolerate. Have you ever heard the word, I tolerate people who are different than me? You tolerate them? I believe in tolerance. Okay, y'all, I want you to go up to one of your friends and be like, I tolerate you. I tolerate you? What? No, we don't tolerate each other. We welcome it and embrace and enjoy the diversity and the difference of one another. And when we get to that place where we're like, it's not about tolerance. It's about embracing the differences and about realizing that when you and I are together, I'm better. I grow and I'm different and I'm a better Christian because I'm different than you. And your difference changes me. That is the heavenly banquet. That is what we seek to be invited to. And that is what we seek to invite others to.
We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons. We can't wait to meet you.